Before I get into the conversation, I'd like to just give you a general overall opinion on something. A week ago today, in fact, a week ago this morning, I took the morning off. I was doing the store in Pennsylvania, and I had a little time before I had to be at the IJO show. And so I decided to visit a place called Falling Water. Falling Water is a home that was built by Frank Lloyd Wright in 1935 for a wealthy chain of department store, the guy who owned these department stores in Pittsburgh. And it was an incredible place. If you ever get to outside of Pittsburgh and you get a chance to go, it's just a life-changing experience. It's such a beautiful place of this home that he built on top of a waterfall. And if you want to see a good picture of it, you can Google Falling Water sometime. But I liked it. My wife and I are going on vacation the end of this month, and they said, the friends that we're going with said you ought to bring a book. So I found a book on Amazon that was on the history of Falling Water and how it was built and the conflict between Frank Lloyd Wright and the owner and all the stuff that went into these innovations that he had created as part of this magnificent home. And the opening quote in the book was by a Frenchman named Henri Poisson, who's a poet. And he said that when you see something or when you look at something, you actually can see it two different ways. You can see what you see with your eyes, and then you see what you see with your heart or with your spirit. And how many people, when they go to Falling Water, they kind of have this sense of it being a very calm, kind of like walking into a great church or walking into something where the sensation that you get is bigger than just what you're actually seeing. And we've all been in places where we've been concerned or afraid, and you kind of get a sense of something, and it's subliminal. And in all honesty, what that has to do with what we're talking about today is I'm getting ready to show you how your customers, when they come in your store, they have that innate ability to have a different experience than just what they see in the showcases. They have the ability to be taken and find a piece of merchandise in your store that's a beautiful, magnificent piece of jewelry that touches them and is the personification of what that bride wants to wear on her finger for the rest of her life, or the gift that somebody wants to buy, a man might want to buy for his wife. And the way that this approaches this subliminal impression is something that all human beings share. And what we're going to talk about today are a couple of books that I'm going to recommend to you that are listed on the handout that kind of deal with this. And I don't want to get too theoretical or too esoteric with the whole thing, but I'd like to leave today with you having a sense that there are some propensities, some tendencies that people have that they don't even perhaps know that they have. And those tendencies are front and foremost when they're making a buying decision in your store. And if you're familiar with what those tendencies are, and if you're aware of them and you adjust your display in your store to take advantage of that, you can make a big difference in your sales. So that's essentially what we're going to talk about today. We've got a lot to cover. I have to mention I'm doing another seminar this afternoon called The Top 10 List of Mistakes Jewelers Make in the Display of Jewelry. There's a very little bit of overlap between the content of this morning and this afternoon, but by and large, they're separate presentations. I'm going to try to get finished in enough time today that we can answer questions and we can deal specifically with any questions you have about your store. Let me also say that we're audio taping this presentation as well as having a copy of the PowerPoint. And if you'd like us to email to you the entire presentation with the audio overlap so you'll be able to hear what you're hearing now, if you'll give us your email address, then we'd be happy to send it to you. You'll get it in a week or so, and you could use it at one of your store meetings or something of that nature. So let's get on with what we're talking about. My name is Larry Johnson. I'm the owner of Larry Johnson Consulting out of Colleyville, Texas. I'm the author of this book, A Complete Guide to Effective Jewelry Display, which we're offering here at the show for $30 delivered, which is half price. It's a book that pretty well goes through some of the basics of jewelry display. I wrote it several years ago, and it's the best-selling book on jewelry display in American history. There's only one other one, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. But when we wrote that, we decided that we would take all the royalties and put them into a savings account for our 13 grandkids for their college fund. And right now we got lunch on the opening day covered between all of them. I write each month or very frequently for In-Store Magazine, Canadian Jeweler. You may have read some of the work that I've done there. My consulting business is very simple. I work with independent jewelers all over the world to help them rearrange the displays in their store to help them sell more. I'm not a jeweler. I never went to gemologist school. I've never owned a jewelry store. I spent my career selling displays as president of Chip and Hook and a few other companies. So I learned how to arrange the displays in a way to make the jewelry that you know about sell better. I did a lot of designs for Zales and Helzberg over the years. Zales has a video camera in some of their showcases in their test store where you can actually videotape the eyes of the person when they're looking in a case, so I know where people look first. I know how to make the jewelry that you know how to make. I know how to make that jewelry sell, and that's what I do in store, in your location, 3 days, helping you if you need new displays, rearranging what you've got, generally improving the layout of the store, and I do that now for the last 5 years. It runs $3,450 for a 3-day visit, and I've done about 150 stores, I guess, in the last 5 years. So I mentioned to you that we have books that I think are really helpful to you. I'm going to give you the highlights out of that book. The very first one, if you're only going to read one, is a fascinating book. These books, I think, can help you get, it's not the first one. These books can help you get a good basis in visual merchandising. It always blows me away that you wouldn't let an amateur go into your shop and fix a diamond ring or repoint a setting or appraise something, but you're okay with letting Betty Lou go into many people are okay with letting Betty Lou go in because she has a flair for setting up the showcases. Believe me, setting up showcases is not something we're born with. If you want to do it right, anybody can put the stuff in a case, and almost anybody can make it kind of pretty. But making it kind of pretty is not the same as making it sell. And what I'm going to do today is show you some of those principles. If you get a couple of these books or rent them or whatever, read them online, I think whoever is responsible for display in your store will be able to do a better job. So I start with any basic visual merchandising book. A lot of local junior colleges run a fashion jewelry course. On eBay, on Amazon, there's all kinds of basic visual merchandising textbooks. And this is how to set up a window and just the fundamental principles of visual merchandising. I cover a little of it in my book, but honestly, you can buy one of these for $5 on eBay, and whoever is responsible should just for display in your store should just take a couple of minutes, read through that book and understand the fundamental principles. The second book is the one that I'm the most familiar and feel most strongly about, and that's this book, Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. Dr. Ariely is a professor at Duke, so he's a good old Southern boy, and he has spent a lot of his life studying how people make what appear to be irrational decisions, but they make those irrational decisions in a very predictable way. We're going to go through some of that here in a minute when we get into depth on some of his principles and how they apply to your store. The second book is Dr. Barry Schwartz from Swarthmore. He wrote a book called The Paradox of Choice. And what it boils down to is that if you give people too many choices, they don't decide. So we'll get into his book again in a second. The third is Why We Buy by Paco Underhill. Mr. Underhill has a company that consults with all kinds of retail stores around the world to find the best layout. You asked me a few moments ago, which way do people go when they go into the store? I gave you an answer that came from his book and his research that he's done. And the last book is my book on jewelry display. And as I said, it's kind of basic. It covers from store design, colors, materials, maintenance, security, all the different aspects of how to deal with jewelry displays in the current store. So let's get started with the book by Dr. Ariely. What he says that I think really strikes home and what I would ask you to focus on is that when you make a purchase, You start with a large universe of choices, and making a purchase is a matter of narrowing those choices down to this ring. And if you can't get that customer to change from the entirety of your whole store, if you can't get them from the immensity of what you offer in your store down to this case, down to this tray, down to these three, down to this one, you're not going to make the sale. And so what we realize is that you've got to control that comparison. You've got to control that effort in order to make the sale. If you don't control it, then you lose the sale. So going back to this idea of it being comparative, when someone is making a decision about where they're going to shop, they decide between your store and online, or between your store and the store down the street. They decide between this ring and that ring. They decide between this price point or maybe a little bit more. They decide, does this ring appear to be worth what I'm asking for it, or does this one look like it's not quite worth as much? So we have to find a way to control that comparison. And what I do in my practice that I'm the most surprised at is I ask all of my clients to fill out a survey form before I get there. And it's about 5 pages long. And it deals with, why do people shop at Joe's Jewelers? Why do we have some people who don't buy? Who are our biggest competitors? What are 3 things we really do well? What are 3 things we don't do so well? What color of display is the best color for displaying diamonds? Why should people buy from us? Why do some people don't buy from us? What happened the last time we lost a sale? We ask all these questions. And in that, I ask, who are our 3 biggest competitors? And it's interesting to me, the answers that I get from the people who work in your store telling me who your 3 biggest competitors are. I did a pawn shop in South Texas not too long ago, and the guy said his biggest competitor was Tiffany. I really don't think so, you know. But it's interesting to see who do you think you're competing with in your store. And then when I get to the town where I'm consulting, I go visit those 3 stores because I want to see. Remember what I just said? It's comparative. How can I know what I need to be doing for you if I don't know what they're doing? But I'm amazed by how many people don't know that much about their competition. And what they know about their competition is what their own good customers are telling them. I shop with you, Bob, because Bill down the street has lousy service. Well, that's all well and good, but it's very possible that there's somebody down at Bill's saying that you have lousy service. And I think what's important is that we need to do a survey, an analysis of what are the strengths and weaknesses of your competition. You know, what are they good at? How does their store look? How do their prices compare? How competent is their sales team? How big is their selection? Why do people shop there? How do we stack up? And what can we do to improve our store? So one of the first things that I suggest you do is have a gut check, honest to goodness conversation with yourself of the guy down the street must be doing something right or he wouldn't be in business. What is he doing right and how do we compare? And like I said, when I'm doing that survey and going in and visiting these stores, and I'm looking at it, I'm trying to establish that comparative. Let's assume I'm looking for an engagement ring. How does that experience happen here? How easy is the store to shop? How big is their selection? How does their sales team approach me? And then when I'm in your store, I look at exactly the same thing. If you can control that comparison, and if you understand, you have to understand it before you can control it, and you have to understand it realistically. You can't kid yourself about you being better at everything than they are. You have to look honestly at it, and then all of a sudden we can sit down in our strategizing and come up with the intention or the plan of what we're going to do to make you superior to that store in every way. So we make a list of the good and the bad of that store, and making that list allows us to help us move forward. There's an experiment that I do, another point from Dan Aurelier's book that is a little bit more fun. It's always a chance. I kind of worry when I offer this, but let's try this experiment and see whether or not Dr. Aurelier was right. If you've been through one of these in my seminars before, I apologize for the repetition. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you a slide. I ask you just to do what it says. Don't overthink it. Remember, we're dealing here with not our subconscious, but that We're not thinking about it too much. We're coming from the heart, kind of like my example of the French poet. So let's do this. Pick a number. Okay, how many people picked 1? Look around. Watch this guy. All right, keep an eye on him. How many people picked 4? There's one guy back there. So we're one. How many people picked 2? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many people picked 3? Look around. 85% of the people that you ask to pick a number will pick 3. Now, Goldilocks picked 3. It's in the middle. It's not at the extreme on this end, and it's not at the extreme on this end. It's nice and comfortable. If you check with McDonald's, their biggest selling drink is the medium drink, not the large, not the small, the medium. If you go to Ruth Chris, their most popular steak is medium. Not that many people say rare, not that many people say well done. So, okay, other than winning a drink at the bar, what good is that example? All right, the reason that it's good is that if you offer a 4th choice, instead of only offering 3 choices, you'll sell more of the 3rd option. I did a store up in Chicago that had a similar layout at a different price point. They had a bunch of your choice for $19.99, $1,999, $29.99, $49.99. And I was reading this book on the flight up from Dallas that morning, and I went to the store and he said, "What do you think?" And I say what I always say, "How's it working?" Because the only thing that matters about whether a display is good or not is whether or not it's selling the merchandise. And I said, "How's it going?" He said, "I'm selling the heck out of the $29.99, but I wish I sold more $49.99. Well, it had only been an hour since I read the book, so I remembered what I'd read. And I said, "Have we got anything in the vault we could sell for $69.99? Yes. So we went out and we got half a dozen pieces and we did a your choice $69.99. His sales of the $49.99 went up 45% in the next 90 days because it was the 3rd choice. So in your store, what you do is, if you're going to have diamond studs, and by the way, these are backwards, the best studs are always at the top, not at the bottom. There's no such thing as a bottom shelf tequila. You know, it's top shelf, so you put the best up at the top. So consequently, if you're going to have these in here, and you find yourself selling a lot, look at here, just a coincidence. Those are missing, and those are missing. Why? Because that's the number 3 choice. I mean, it's backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you're going to have these, then I always put back here behind it a larger pair, so that if I'm already selling the 1 carat total weight, I'll put a 1.5 carat or a 2 carat pair behind them. Now the 1 carat doesn't look like I'll sell more of the 1 carat. So if you want to sell more very big, you just have to display something or show something very big to sell more of the big size. Let's move on. The second book I mentioned to you is The Paradox of Choice by Dr. Schwartz. What he says is that showing too many choices hurts your chances of making a sale. Let's say hypothetically we all decide we're going to go to dinner together tonight. We pull the Atlanta, there's not a phone book anymore, but we pull up restaurants in Atlanta and there's 5,000 possibilities from Thai to vegan to, Chinese, Japanese, Mongolian. If we all are going to wait until we come to an agreement with that many choices, we're never going to decide. If you're going out to dinner and you say, do you want Italian, seafood, steak, or whatever, or seafood, or whatever, if you've only got 3 or 4 choices, you have a much better chance of getting somebody to make a decision. Particularly when it comes to millennials, because millennials have so much information at their disposal that the more input that you give them, the more choices you give them, the more they have to get deeper into it, and they find themselves walking away. And what we have a tendency to do as jewelers is to just keep throwing choices at them, hoping that something's going to stick. So we say, if you can't choose from the 150 I got 225 alloy I can show you. And if that's not good enough, we'll look online or in this catalog, and if that's not good enough, I'll make something custom for you. You've given them so many choices that you've immobilized them before you came out of the gate. So my recommendation is that you find a way to give people the right number of choices so they feel like they've seen enough to make an informed decision, but they don't feel like that they can't make a decision at all. Here's an example from Dr. Schwartz's book. He had a store that actually offered free tastings of jam, and he had 6 different flavors of jam in this store. And if you tasted the jam on the cracker and you wanted to buy a bottle of jam, you got a $1 off coupon to pay for the jam. It worked real well on one particular Saturday. So the next Saturday he thought, well, that worked real well, let's do it, but let's do it on a bigger scale. So he offered 24 different kinds of jam, same $1 coupon, same table, same store. The results were that 30% of the people bought the first time and 3% bought the second time. You can't taste 30 different flavors of jam. So consequently, you don't know if the next one is that much better. When you give somebody fewer choices, they can deal with it rationally and make an informed decision. He came to that, he mentions in the introduction to the book, and you can relate to it, that he went in to buy a pair of jeans. And he walked in the store and he said, I need a new pair of blue jeans. And the person behind the counter said, well, do you want stone-washed or dark blue, or do you want, you want them ripped in the knees? Do you want boot cut? Do you want slim legs? He said, I just want a pair of jeans. And they had so many different varieties of blue jean styles, he couldn't find what was just basic, classic Levi jeans. I guess he finally found them, and he was able to buy it. But he began to realize that if you go in the grocery store down the street from your house, I know the one by us, that chain, has 600 types of olive oil. You don't need 600 choices when you're trying to buy a bottle of olive oil. So what happens is if you offer too many choices, you'll lose the sale. The goal here is to make the customer believe that they've seen enough choices to make a good decision. I run into that a lot when I'm doing the bridal counter in small towns that are maybe an hour and a half from a bigger town, where the couple comes in, they're in small town Texas, they're looking at this independent store, and their first statement is, maybe we ought to drive up to Houston, or we ought to drive over to Dallas some weekend and look at what's available there. We've got to give them the impression in our small town store that we have enough of a selection, or we have the capacity to get them the choices they need, so they don't feel the need to drive to Little Rock to look at somebody else's choice. The book that has been around a long time that deals with retail in general is Why We Buy by Paco Underhill. And he goes through an awfully lot, but there are some aspects of his book that deal specifically with jewelry retail environments. And what he talks about is making your customer feel that they are comfortable and that shopping in your store is easy. Take for a second, if you go on a website and you're not that familiar with how the website works, and you're constantly going down some rabbit hole on the website and you can't navigate around the way you want to, after you get frustrated, you'll block out of the website and you'll go somewhere else. It works the very same way if your showcases are set up with all the stuff just crammed in the showcase and it's hard for someone to find things, or if the way it's put in the showcase makes it difficult for people to shop. For example, you don't want your customer to do this. And almost every store I go into has this exact problem. The problem is that in the very front of the case, they're putting merchandise on trays that are on an angle. So if I want to look at this ring, the only way I have of looking at this ring is to walk up to the showcase and bend over and look down through the front of the case. Nobody, particularly as Underhill states, particularly a woman, wants to come up and stop in front of the showcase, bend over, stick her backside out in the aisle so that she can see what the merchandise looks like. So what I suggest to you is when you're doing this, buy trays that are flat. This is in the wrong place. If this is at the front of the case, this is an angle display, as are that. Use your angle displays at the back, because when they're in the back of the case, the angle of that display is aimed up at your eye, which is looking down through the top. But down here in the front of the case, we need those trays to be flat. Another point that Underhill talks about a great deal is dynamism and creating dynamism in the store and in your presentations. You're going to walk around the show tomorrow, I guess it is, and over the weekend, looking at different displays and looking at different vendors. And you're going to walk up to some vendor you know, and you're going to say hello and shake hands, and you're going to say, what have you got that's new? One of the things I run into a lot is that we don't do enough as independent jewelers to make our store have that same what's new, that same dynamism that we expect from our vendors when we're at these various shows. So I want you to think about the stores that you shop in that have conveyed this changing dynamic. And grocery stores do it with fresh merchandise coming in, the Apple store, Starbucks, BMW dealerships, Marine Corps recruiters. There's always something new going on. And there's always this sense of it's not the same store that you were in when you were in here before. We need to show our clients how our store selection and our capabilities change, and they change almost daily. Whenever you sell half a dozen pieces, whenever you get a shipment in of half a dozen new pieces. So how are we going to get across to them the idea that our store is a dynamic, breathing, organic entity where you come in and there's always something new? And we can do that through signage that we put up. I'm going to show you a couple of good examples. We can certainly do it in display. We're going to talk about the top 10 gift ideas here in a minute. That's a part of that. We can revise our sales presentation. Do we have salespeople who are saying exactly the same thing day in and day out? If they're talking to Mrs. Jones and they tell her something and she doesn't buy and she's in 2 months later and they tell her the same thing, we're reducing our chances of being able to make the sale. We can certainly do it online. There we're talking to those people who are savvy as it pertains to Facebook and things of that nature, and we can show new pieces, change our Facebook posting every month or every week or so with new images, something dynamic that's available in the store. We can do it with the TV set that's in the store showing a slideshow. We just finished showing you one that our company offers that changes the slides every month for 99 bucks. But the whole idea is to not convey a boring image to our customer or a sense that we don't have anything that's new. So in your next sales meeting, having everyone come up with a plausible answer to the question of what have you got that's new, and not say, well, I don't know, let me see what no, we've got an answer. Let me show you these earrings that we just got in the other day, so that everybody is aware of what a positive, enthusiastic answer is to that question of, do you have anything new since I was in last? Another thing we can do is create limited time specials. It's a sale for 2 weeks. We can do a markdown where we're doing this right now in about half a dozen of my clients, where we have a piece in a vignette on top of a showcase. It's $199, and we knock the price down by 10 bucks a week until it's sold. And people come in. We've done them where it's a blind auction. Why not? I mean, you're going to have somebody who's going to pay you whatever you're looking for that piece, and it creates excitement and a reason for somebody to come in, that whole eBay mindset. The silent auction I mentioned, and certainly to have your sales staff even volunteer what's new. This is a great example. This is a blackboard in a ladies' lingerie shop in Dallas. And these are a few of our favorite things. And there's some different items on here that they're talking about. We've taken this and we've done a blackboard by when you come into your store on an easel. And these are a few new items we've received, and we list the new pieces that have come in. And when we sell one, we don't erase it, we draw a line through it. It's just like a restaurant that talks about the specials. And there's a line through it because all of the fillets have been sold. It has that dynamism that things are constantly changing in the store. I was unable to get this picture to switch over, so I want you to use your imagination. This was another one that was that deal of the day, where there was a tower, there was a piece of jewelry in there, and it was being offered. I got that idea from going into a Lowe's building materials store. They now have a big stand-up display when you walk into Lowe's that says deal of the day. and it runs $100, $125. The manager there is a friend of mine, because I think personally I'm responsible for about half of his sales. And he said they're selling the heck out of whatever is promoted that particular time. So we have some type of a deal of the day. In addition, this was at a Costco in which they were selling a woman's wrap. And I know you can't see this, but it was interesting because it was a wrap that you could wrap around this way, and it was a scarf. You could do this with it, and it was a cap. It just had a lot of different options. But if you know how Costco works, there's not somebody there walking them, showing them how to use it. So on the box that the manufacturer did, he's got how to wear it here. The infinity, over the shoulder, I'm not sure what that says. The cowboy, I'd love to see that one. But anyway, here's different ideas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 different ways you can wear this. It made me wonder, in this day and age, there are an awfully lot of young women who perhaps their mother never really shared with them. Maybe they weren't in a position to enjoy fine jewelry, and maybe consequently nobody had a pair of hand-me-down pearls. I think there are an awfully lot of 20 to 30-year-old women who've never really been shown how to wear high-quality, high-fashion accessories. And so if no one is saying, here's where you can wear your pearls here in small-town Texas, then they're not going to be interested in buying those. So what we do is we'll put a photo in there of Lady Gaga or somebody that she can relate, the customer can relate to wearing pearls in addition to one of Grace Kelly or Jackie Onassis or something. And we start to explain that if you're going to church, if you're going to the theater, if you're going to a concert, that's a good place you can wear these pearls. And helping people understand what to do with the merchandise you have for sale, because assuming they automatically know how to wear these pieces, I think is a mistake. I mentioned that we do a lot with store monitors. This is that product. I'd invite you to stop by our booth at the show here tomorrow, and you can see an actual sample of this. We're running 3 months free right now. But this show changes every month with a slide presentation that features the actual merchandise that's in your case. You can put prices with it. It's got your logo with it. And you can use these images on your Facebook page. Here's one for a jeweler in Arlington, Cox Jeweler. This is one of our images. He cuts it right out of the slideshow and sticks it on his Facebook page. And that's not what's so cool. What's so cool is, do you have this ring in the store? So this actually motivated Miss McClure, who an hour later, by the way, came in and bought it, to come in and purchase that ring off that slide presentation in the store. I'll also mention in our booth 352, we're giving away a free image for you to come in.
444.
What's that?
Our booth number is 444.
444?
Yes.
We got moved? Did the check bounce or? We're going to be somewhere in the other room in there. I tell you what, walk around until you see Harry and Meghan. We've got a life-size image of Harry and Meghan. We've got a camera, and we've got somebody who knows how to put it together. You stand there, you put your arm around Harry, or Meghan, I guess, and we'll take the photograph and we'll send you the file with in a format that you can post it either on the TV in your store, or you can post it on your Facebook page with, I should have had my ring made at so-and-so. So, I don't know. So, lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about, let me make sure I'm okay time-wise. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the principles that I think you want to use in your store to make it easier for people to shop. And the first one is to reanalyze how you've organized your bridal case. A lot of stores I go in have their bridal case organized by vendor. Here's the rings I got from Gabriel. Here's the rings I got from Joe Blow. Here's the rings, the bridal selection I got from this guy and this guy and this guy. The record so far is a store in Norman, Oklahoma with 19 vendor displays. 19. So I asked the salesperson, if I walk in with Betty Lou and we're getting engaged and we're here looking at a halo, which one do you take me to? And she said, that one. And I said, why? And she said, because I like that sales rep the best. That's not a reason. If I buy my engagement ring off the one she pointed, the margins that the owner of the store makes are smaller than if I buy it out of this one, which is his store-owned, non-branded, other than the store brand, his merchandise. So what I prefer to do is, if you have a bridal line in your store like Hearts on Fire or Forevermark or Tacori, and to some extent, and certainly, I guess Simon G, but certainly, and to an extent, Gabriel, if you have those and people come into your store and they're asking for that brand, if they come in saying, I want to see a Tacori ring, it ought to be in a Tacori display. But 80% of the people or more who walk in your store don't know any of those brands. So consequently, when you walk them over to this display with rings by the Larry Johnson collection, and they say, well, who's Larry Johnson? And what I run into an awful lot is they'll say, your sales staff will say, well, that's one of the lines we carry. Well, that's kind of weak. So Larry Johnson lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he uses the sunsets like Georgia O'Keeffe used to inspire him to design these rings. Well, you got to have a story of explaining why you've got his name in your showcase. You just put yourself in the position of having to make two sales. Here you are talking about this guy in New Mexico before you even start talking about what ring you want to buy. If it's in a display that's just your store's name, they are already in your store because they bought into your brand. Why put yourself in a position of having to make two sales when one sale's hard enough? This is my brand. You're here at Johnson Jewelers. Here's all my halos. And you save yourself the having to convince somebody or buy into the romance of the designer. If in fact you have Hearts on Fire, they do a great job of teaching you how to kick right into your Hearts on Fire presentation, and you can go down that road. But if we organize your rings by style, where we have halos here, and solitaires here, and sets here, and traditionals, and vintage, if we have them in different groups, and if I have a little tray with 5 rings in it, and when you come in, odds are the bride-to-be is going to pull out her phone and show you a Pinterest image of what she likes. You're going to look at it and you're going to say, oh, that's a halo. Come on over here to my halo collection. And we're right, well, actually in this store, this is down in Bashinsky's, down in Macon, just south of here. You're going to see this is their halo selection. It's important, by the way, I'll come back to that in just a second. If we organize these into specific groups, and there's no magic number of them, but if we organize them by ring style, we make it simpler because now we are organizing our store the way somebody shops. Going back to your vendor, nobody organizes their closet by where they bought their clothes. This is all my Nordstrom stuff. This is my LL Bean stuff. You organize your closet by how you get dressed. Or my wife will tell you, or not at all. So consequently, if we organize it this way, it's organized by how people think. They probably never heard of your vendor. You don't have styles. If I were in that store in Oklahoma with all those vendor displays, if I wanted to see halo, I had to make 20 stops. It's here, and I'm trying to understand what the difference is. It's just confusing. Make it easy for me to choose and compare. Don't have the styles all over the store. And the way you get started with this is sit in your store, watch one of your salespeople sell a bridal sale, and watch how much moving around they do. Shane Decker is a real qualified and capable sales trainer and a good friend. He says when you get that customer in front of that bridal case, you don't move and they don't move. You're nodding your head. You know exactly what I mean. He says if you step away, your chances of losing that sale go up by 30%. So consequently, you say, Eric, would you mind getting me the ring sizer? Or would you mind, you don't ever leave them to sit there and say, I don't know, I think we ought to drive to Dallas and see what's available over there. Going back to this, I usually recommend 4 to 5 styles for those groups. Halo, certainly, solitaire or multi-stone. It just depends on how many rings you have. And the way we determine this, we take all the bridal, pile it on top of the case, and sort it into 3, 4, 5, 6 groups, so that we have groups that, and again, we have groups that will allow us to show our inventory, as I said, by the way people shop. You notice these words right here can mean anything to anybody. That's because you're going to have rings that you don't know how to sort them out. I'd rather have 5 groups than 4 groups. So consequently, we'll call it vintage, or we'll call it contemporary. I've got a client in LA that has a strong gay population, and we have a category called handmade. And he sells a ton of jewelry, just the unique stuff, the not your mother's engagement ring category, and it's stuff that would work as a wedding or engagement ring for a couple that wants something out of the ordinary. So the only thing I would say is when you've divided your inventory up into these groups, you need to have about the same number of rings in every group. I did a store in Chicago, it's called Albert's, it's in Shearerville, it's about a $25 million store. And I did the store some years back, and they called me a couple of years ago and asked me to come up to design one particular display for them. And I arrived and I walked in, I looked at the bridal area, and this is a monster of a store. And they do very, very well. And they had 65 2-carat and over live pieces in the case. 65. And they said, these aren't selling as well as the other stuff we're selling. How can we display these better? So I said, let me watch. So I got a stool and I sat there on a Saturday and watched people shop. And there was this lady came in and she's looking at 1/2 carat and under, and then she's looking at 1/2 carat to 3/4 carat, and then 1 carat or 3/4 to 1, 1.5. And because they have a big selection, they got about 400 in that size, and about 400 in this size, and about 400 in this size. And when they got over to the 2 carat and over, he had the 62. First words out of her mouth was, is this all you have? I've been in states that don't have 62 2 carat and over. And the thing was, we were responsible for that. We had set the stage with 300, 300, 300, and 62. And consequently, remember what I said in the beginning? That this whole process is a comparative process? She was comparing our selection of 2 carat and overs to our selection of 1/2 carats. We had set that precedent in our own mind, and that's part of the issue. So you want to be careful when you organize this that you fill in with alloy or something or other until you get approximately the same quantities. The next thing I want to talk about is implementing a top 10 gift idea program. And I'm going to have to speed up just a little bit to get this in. Let me stop right here and say at our booth, we're giving free consultations through the entire period of the show. You set a time, we'll have a sheet up here if you want to make an appointment. We'll sit down, we'll spend an hour together. I'll go over all the things that I said too fast in this presentation and speak more slowly. We'll talk about problems you have in your store. It's a free 1 hour. I'm happy to do it. That's what we're here for. So just come up and sit down. I don't know where our booth is. You said 644. 444. 666 would be bad, wouldn't it? 444.
Yes, 444.
Yeah. Come see us. All right. The top 10 gift ideas comes back again to Lowe's. I walked into a Lowe's one time, and it was right before Thanksgiving, and they had the aisles full of all of these items that would make great gift items. And they started with a $7 bird house you can build with your grandkids, all the way up to a $3,000 stainless steel toolbox with Wi-Fi and boomer speakers in it. And if my wife wanted to go to Lowe's and buy me something for Christmas, she could walk down through there, and again, instead of this huge warehouse store, they had narrowed my selection, not narrowed it, but they had helped me pre-selected a dozen or 2 dozen things that would be great gifts, and they were in the aisles right there. She puts it on the cart, walks up, pays for it, and she's done. So I came home and I put this together for independent jewelers. If somebody walks in the store this time of year and they're saying, I'm looking for a gift for my wife for birthday or anniversary or Mother's Day or whatever the time is, or get out of the doghouse. When they walk in, most men, when they come into the store, what do they want? Something that's not an arm and a leg, something she's going to like, and something I can get out of the store in a hurry with. Men don't shop, men buy. Women shop. Men come in, let me buy it, and if I'm out in 5 minutes, it's a great deal for me. So consequently, what we do is we choose 10 items that will fill the need that your customer came in looking for, and we emphasize those as a quick selection, a quick solution to their search. He can get on about getting back home and watching the game or whatever it is. So the strategy is to choose those good ideas, make sure that they are replaceable. In other words, not a one of a kind. Make sure that when you sell that pendant, you can order another one because you're going to sell it again and again and again. Identify each one in the case, and I'll show you what that should look like. Choose the items at all price points. Start with something from Pandora for $110 and have your number 10 item be the most expensive non-bridal piece of jewelry you have in your store. We did this for Krogan's down in Charleston a year ago. Number 10 was a $54,000 diamond, cushion cut diamond they'd had for 2 years. We sold it an hour after we put the display in the case. So choose the items at all the different price points and make darn sure everybody in the store knows where the 10 are and knows what to say about those 10. Have a sales meeting, come together, say, what are we going to say about this piece? I'm not saying a spiel. I'm saying that you're all in agreement on what we're going to talk about with this particular one.
You want all these in the same case?
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
I'll be there in just a second. The price points go from 100 up. These are the price points I recommend. We create a small display to emphasize them, train the team. I wrote an article for InStore called The Gift of Ideas. If you stop by my booth, I'll send you a copy. The way I put it in the case is I wrap a ring box. I take a card that I get at Staples for a little dinner party place thing. Go on their website, you type in the text, print it on your printer in the store, put the item on a display by itself. Here's another example. Here's another example. And typically what I do is I'll put the payments per month. I place them all around the store. Why? Because if the guy comes in the store and he's looking for his wife's birthday gift and his budget's $1,000 and he walks around and he sees something here really nice for $2,000, his budget at Christmas is $2,500, he'll remember the $2,000 item that he saw, and come November, he'll come back and he'll buy that one. Plus, I want him to have a sense of what we offer in the store. Plus, if he really likes these colored stone, but he said, I'd rather see emeralds. If you're at that, if you have them all combined in one showcase, then you have to say, well, let's go over to the colored stone case. If this is in the colored stone case, I don't have to move. Remember that point? Only caveat to this is this works great if your salespeople buy in. The record right now is I have 17 sales in the first 10 days after we put this in the case. If your salespeople don't say, let me show you here at Joe's Jewelers, we've got these top 10 gift ideas. If they don't use that intro, you're wasting your time with this and you can kind of forget about it. Displaying your merchandise to match and support what you're going to say about it. I think, get to the point. The point is an awfully lot of people put merchandise in the case in kind of a helter-skelter manner and then expect me to buy into it when you tell me it's really good quality stuff. It's awfully hard for someone to look at a huge selection and pick out what they want or believe that it's really good quality items. You know, if you treat it like this, how am I going to believe you when you tell me that these are all high dollar, really wonderful chains? If you display, and this is a Tacori display, if you display your jewelry like this, what ends up happening here is you're saying you don't care which one I buy. You're just lining them all up. They must all be the same because they're on exactly the same display. Whereas I would be willing to bet that if I dropped my credit card down and said I'll buy anything in that case, what do you want me to buy? I'd be willing to bet you could find the one that's the most expensive. Why are we displaying it the same as everything else? How can you tell me that's a really unique $25,000 semi-mount if you're displaying it the same way you're displaying a $2,500 semi-mount? So we have this concept of, I mentioned, is this all you have? We have to have enough choices for people to make a decision. I suggest you try what I call my 20-40-40 concept. It's very straightforward. You take the top 20%, the most expensive 20% of the jewelry in the case, and you put it on individual elements. Why? It's the best. And the adjectives that you're going to use when you're talking about it are going to be unique and special and one of a kind, and you're going to be talking to me about the great quality of that particular piece. You drop down to the next 40%, the middle 40%, this is better. And you put that on trays that hold 3. Here's the best, here's the better. And that's that in-between price point. And you put it here in the center of the case. Let me just simply say, those cameras I mentioned to you at Zales showed me that when someone walks up and looks at this platform, they start right here. And if they're Asian, they look to this side and down. If they're not Asian, because people, Asia read from right to left. If they're Western, they start here and they look over here and down. This is a dead spot, this is a dead spot. It's this. So consequently, if they're starting right here, then they're going to see my best first, the pieces I want most to sell. The middle gets me the bridge, and the bottom is my least expensive. And there, I'm talking about selection. I give you $1,000 to go buy a car, you can't be real picky. I give you $100,000 to go buy a car, you can buy almost anything you want. So consequently, at that lower price point, use my example, the $1,000 car range, I'm going to talk to you that here at Larry's Jewelers, we have a great selection at that price. Because selection is something you're not used to having at lower price points. But if you're up here looking at this one, I'm not going to talk about selection. I'm going to talk about handcrafted, uniqueness, handmade, one of a kind, all those things, because the same thing that your Tesla would be if that's what you bought with the $100 grand. So I'm going to display it in a way that matches my presentation. We're going to talk just real briefly about vendor displays. Since I talked about them before, I will say that having them free is not always a good idea. You have to look at how much room they take up, what color they are, do they promote their brand or your brand, and what do they add that makes that sale easier. I'm okay with using them if it's a brand of jewelry your customer asks for. If it fills your guidelines. In my seminar this afternoon, I'll talk about setting sales goals, where you take the total number of feet you have in your store, you take the total dollars of jewelry that you sell. You sell $1 million worth of jewelry, you have 100 feet of showcase, you're selling $10,000 worth of jewelry per foot, you have a 50% gross margin, you're making $5,000 per foot. You go in here and you see a vendor and he's got a display this big. Is that big? Is it going to help or hurt my average per sales per foot? I've only got a certain amount of space in my store to do my business in. I'm at $1 million, I want to be at 2. Is this going to get me there? Does that vendor display communicate some selling point that you can't do with your own? Don't use it if your brand is what's bringing the customer in your store. If you have that 2 sales example I gave you before, if it's too big or if it's chartreuse, if it makes your store brand goods look less than. Number one thing I do, if I come in your store and you've got these vendor displays and they're all brand new, and over here is this merchandise you own that's not anybody else's brand, and it's on displays that you bought when Jimmy Carter was president, you know, it doesn't look all that great. And these are the ones you'd rather sell. Your margins are better on that than they are on this vendor's display. So consequently, let's spend $500 and let's make our stuff that we really want to sell look as good as those vendor displays we got from somebody else. So what does all this mean? What this means is that what I said in the beginning, that visual merchandising is complicated and it's a science and it can make a big difference. You either need to learn some of these principles or have the person in your store who's responsible for your displays learn these principles, or you need to get somebody in the store who can help you set this up. A great vehicle for starting this process, and if you want to talk about that at my booth 444 is your inventory performance report by category. If you're an Edge customer, there's a report that you can run off of your software that tells you the same amount of great detail or more than just like if you go to the doctor for your annual checkup and he tells you your cholesterol rating and all. I look at those before I go in a store because that tells me really what you're selling, how old your merchandise is that you've got left, what these average price points are. We don't want to promote colored stone rings for $495 if your average sale is $595. If your average sale is $595, I want to promote 20% higher than that. So I want to promote something for $749 to raise that average sale. If we raise that average sale in every case by 20%, magically the store goes up by 20%. So that inventory performance report is extremely critical. If you can run one while you're here and bring it to me or pull it up on your laptop and have it and stop at the booth, we can look at that and tell a lot about what's going on with your store and point out some areas that might be of help to you. And again, that's part of what we do at no charge. So, or you can take my card and call me and we can do it by phone. So if you'd like the free image, ignore the 352. It's what booth number?
444.
Excellent. Thanks for your time. If I'll answer any questions, if anybody has any, and I appreciate your time. My seminar this afternoon is 2:30, I believe, and it's on the top 10 list of mistakes that jewelers make in the display of jewelry. And I wanted to also say I appreciate the vendors from SJTA who sponsored our seminar here this morning, and I hope you've been able to pick up a few things from it. I'll have a sign-up sheet up here if there's a time you'd like to make an appointment, and otherwise I'll answer any questions, and thank you for your time today. Thank you.